Good evening, viewers. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Today, we have Peter Wright with us. In previous episode, we have discussed about the IT, social media, and related questions. But in that episode, we have some extra questions, and because it's a quite interesting subject, so we have requested Peter to stay with us and we could discuss more questions. So this week, we have some more questions for you, and I hope you will enjoy this discussion. Welcome, Peter, again in my show.
Thank you very much.
We will start again with the social media. So is there any regulator in this country or all over the world for the social media?
There's no direct regulator, no, which is surprising, particularly in this country when we seem to have a regulator to cover everything. Technically, we have Ofcom, which is the Office for Communications, which looks at TV broadcasting and things, but that doesn't really extend as far as social media. We have the Information Commissioner, which deals with data protection and the sharing of information. So they're probably the closest thing we've got to a regulator. But ultimately, do they regulate any of the social media sites directly? No, they don't. So it's not as though they have to apply, to the ICO for a license or go through any sort of vetting process at all. So there is no direct regulator in the sense that we in the UK are used to for the majority of services that are supplied.
Some celebrities have complained to Facebook and Twitter that their accounts have been created falsely on their names. So what are the remedies who are the victim of this?
Where something like that's happened, technically you can then take action under the Fraud Act. Just to give you an example, this happens so often, doesn't it? So you may remember after the Olympics, when it was the Olympics opening ceremony, and one tweet that was sent on that occasion looked as though it was from Danny Boyle, the director of the opening ceremony. It looked like it was him from his Twitter account. It wasn't. Danny Boyle wasn't on Twitter in 2012. I still don't think he is. But someone had set this account up, and everyone thought, oh, that's him tweeting live. Conversely, when the Prince George was born, he had a Twitter account set up within hours, and someone was doing live tweeting of being the new heir to the throne. Funnily enough, that wasn't genuine either, but immediately it had like 60,000 followers within its first few hours, so it shows the power of these things. Now, the key thing if you're going to allege fraud, or the key thing if you're going to actually make any claim, is to say, well, where is the loss? So if you are a celebrity and someone goes and sets up a fake Twitter account and things that are said on there affect what this celebrity or individual can do commercially, then you can then make a claim as a result. So if someone, say, is impersonating, an actress or whatever, and that person then doesn't get a part because someone saw something on Twitter and says, well, if they were going and saying that, we don't want them in our new movie, that's the sort of thing we can say, well, there's the loss. As a result of that, I wasn't in the movie, I didn't receive my $5 million, I'll claim $5 million. There are other issues, though, for example, as well. If for example, through a fake site like that, it ends up saying things that could lower someone's estimation, lower in someone standing in the eyes of the public. In the same way, you could argue that means that individual is sustaining loss as a result as well. So there are several remedies available if you can say, yes, there's been a loss here, and yes, you can then make a claim as a result under the Fraud Act.
Thank you very much. Viewers, we have our guest, Peter, and we're discussing about the social media, IT law, and we will also discuss more information for you. What is coming in coming days about the IT, any legislation in EU, in England? So what's happening in the media world?
Very good question. There's been a mooted data protection regulation that will cover the whole of the European Union, but it's now been going on for the last 4 years. It's been in consultation. It's been lobbied on by people like Facebook, Google, all wanting to ask questions and have changes made to the way that data will be regulated in the EU. It's an important question because all of the social media sites, all of the cloud, for that matter, is based in America, but you've got millions of European users who are regulated by our own internal data protection. Now, this could become law within the next 12 to 18 months in the UK, regardless of any referendum, regardless of whether we're still within the European Union, because even if we are just trading with you within a bloc, we'd still be bound by the laws. And the key thing will be that, of course, everyone in this country has been used to the Data Protection Act since 1998. You see that on the forms. This thing will come in and there won't be an act of Parliament to change matters. It will just be bang. This will now be the law. There'll be a period of a few months before it comes in to make people aware of it, but it will be comparatively a big change. Things that would make a difference, well, at the moment you could be fined up to £500,000 for a data protection breach, i.e. a loss of personal data. Under the new regulation, that could instead be 5% of global turnover. So say to a big communications firm, 500,000 to them is a drop in the ocean. 5% of global turnover, that's a fairly big issue to think about for them. Conversely as well, you could have things like having to report a breach within 24 hours. Now, you may have seen when Morrison's was hacked last year, or Target in America, sometimes it takes them weeks to work out if they've been hacked anyway. So if you're going to turn around and say, you have to report this within 24 hours, otherwise you'll face further penalties, that is a big change for organisations to get used to. So anyone who's operating a business in the UK needs to be thinking carefully about what the current regulations require, but certainly they need to be aware of what could be coming in only a few months' time as well.
What are the protections available to the businesses? How they can protect their IT system, how they kept the data? So is there any special arrangements they can?
Yes, really it's just a matter of making sure you've got the right protections in place. We work with a lot of our clients to say, make sure that you are encrypting your email, make sure that your servers are properly secure if you're storing personal data on there, or if you're storing it in the cloud, ask questions of the cloud provider to make sure that things are being properly protected and cared for. Because if there's a data protection breach, it isn't the cloud provider that's going to get fined for it, it's you, because you're the data controller, you're the one who stored the data there on the cloud. So you can't abrogate that responsibility, you can't pass it on to someone else. And therefore, you need to be asking those questions.
And how safe is this cloud system?
Well, cloud is the future. Arguably, your data, you could say it's safer on a server out in the cloud than it would be on an old dusty server in the back of your office. But the issue, of course, is that it could be in America. So, for example, as lawyers, we have to be careful where our data is stored, because we have to be careful from client confidentiality points of view. If your client information is being stored on a server in California, well, the FBI could look at it, the CIA, the NSA, Homeland Security. So from a confidentiality and security point of view, you'd have concerns about that if the US government can take a look at it.
And how you see a change in legislation that everybody's emails access will be to the agencies, especially to the police and investigation agencies? How you see this change in law?
Well, this is something that the current government is quite keen about, and indeed successive governments always want to have increased powers under anti-terrorism legislation, saying, well, this is to keep you safe, therefore we need to look at your emails, look at all your personal social media accounts. And the issue there is that, of course, people end up sharing large amounts of information. Even if it's your work email, very often people are sending emails to their friends and arranging things. Would you really be happy with the security services flicking through those?
But what's about the fundamental rights of citizens? So
exactly.
Will it be not conflicting with those?
Well, this is the difficulty in this country, because, of course, if you're in America, you've got a written constitution. Over here, we haven't. And that's why, if anything, we've had our liberties have been ridden roughshod over to a certain extent in terms of what the government can do under the Communications Act, as it is. There was recently a move for an even more searching and powerful piece of legislation that was actually defeated through the Liberal Democrats, because they said, well, this isn't actually something that we feel comfortable about bringing in, no matter what the security threat, because it's almost Orwellian when you think about it, Big Brother watching you and being aware of everything that you're doing. And it's one thing I think we have to be very, very careful of in the UK, is indeed the rights of the individual being put secondary to security concerns, and meaning that people do not have the privacy to know that what they are storing online is indeed safe and not being looked at by Big Brother over their shoulder.
Thank you. What's about these emails? Every day people are getting these emails that you have won the lottery, or these, I will say, anonymous. There is no link whatsoever with the real life, but you get these type of surprise emails. So is there any way our viewers can protect themselves from these type of emails, or what is the best way forward for them?
There are various pieces of blocking software out there, and it's always a matter of, if you look on the market and you speak to an expert, you'll always find that there are good products out there. Sometimes they're free, sometimes it's a small amount to pay, but at least that then stops your email inbox being clogged up. The key thing, though, is never reply to them. In the same way, if you get the spam text, you shouldn't respond to that, because then you'll get 20 spam texts that come back. Don't respond to an email like that. And if you do receive an email that, say, purports to be from a bank saying, please give us your sort code and account number so we can transfer some money, well, your bank will never approach you and ask for that sort of information. So certainly if I received an email like that, do not respond to it, delete it. And in the same way, I mean, I wouldn't even respond if I get a phone call from my bank saying, oh, please, will you please go through security and confirm X, Y, Z, and then we do this. I say, no, I'll actually call you. Now, if you want to speak to me, fine, I will call you back, and I will then go through the right levels of security, so I know that I'm actually speaking to my bank and I'm not giving information to someone who's trying to impersonate a bank or a financial institution, for example.
Is there any body, so people, if they want to make a complaint about IT-related or email-related issues, is there any body? They have to go to the police, or how it works?
Well, depending if you think it's heavily fraudulent what's going on there, then you could certainly report it to through the police, Crime Stoppers. It doesn't have to be an urgent thing, but sometimes the more that they're aware of different scams that are taking place, the more they can take action. And it can also be reported to the Information Commissioner. Their site is www.ico.gov.uk. They frequently fine organisations that send out vast amounts of unsolicited spam email or spam texting. So that's one of the reasons I'm sure you've been plagued, like I'm sure a lot of the viewers have, with all of these unsolicited have you had an accident within the last 3 years? Oh, we'd like to talk to you about your PPI claim, all these sorts of things, when you've never even asked for any of this information. Organisations that do that are being increasingly fined by the Information Commissioner for up to 5 or 6 figures because of the way that they've been operating and mining people's data and bothering them with endless texting and spamming with emails.
Thank you. And now in terms of education, because we have talked about IT and all these things, if somebody wants to become a barrister or a solicitor in coming days, because a lot of students are watching our show, so what are the golden principles for them? Which kind of books they should study? Which kind of any ideal things they should do for become a good lawyer or a good barrister?
I think the key thing is to read widely, to take your information in from multiple sources. So for that reason, I wouldn't necessarily direct anyone to any single text or any single source. Indeed, one of the main ways that I stay up to date in my field is actually using Google News alerts and having searches in certain fields. So I get information on data protection every day. I get information on cybersecurity every day through what's published in the newsfeed. So I think it's a matter of making sure you read very, very widely to get a deep implicit understanding of developments in your field. Even if, say, you were very interested in employment law, I'd make sure I'd got a search on Employment Tribunal and make sure that as different decisions came through and were publicised for any reason, you're able to stay up to speed on them. And indeed, to any aspiring lawyer out there, I'd say try and work out quite early on what you're really enjoying and what you'd like to be your specialism, so you can try and stand out that little bit from everyone else. Because there are tens of thousands of people out there who deal with conveyancing, or tens of thousands of litigators. But if you're a litigator with an interest in a certain specific part, say fraud or credit issues or financial services, you're then building up that little specialism and showing why you're a valuable specialist in that field.
Thank you. And any tips for the businesses from IT perspectives? Because from small shopkeeper to a big business or entrepreneurs, in these days they are linked with IT, social media. So what are quick tips for them?
I would say if you're storing data online, think very, very carefully about where it's being stored. Just carry out a quick audit, really, of your business and think, what are we doing online? Do we have any governance for that, any policies to say this is where our data is, or this is how our business is using social media? And think about some of the risks that could come up and think about how you would stop them. So in the same way you've probably got internal policies to cover your employment of employees, and you've tried to assess some risks, think about those risks online as well. Even if it just means, right, put the phones off, put the email off, and just brainstorm for an hour or two and think, what's the worst that could happen? And then try and think, well, if the worst did happen, what would we do? You might not necessarily be able to put all those measures in place, but if you can prove you've thought about it and you've proved you've tried to do as much as you can, that puts you in good stead if anything ever does happen.
Thank you. And what are your thoughts about the advertisements? Sometimes what happens that somebody advertise for the car sale or any item on sale, and somebody picks up that adverts and use it for the fraudulent reasons. So is there any way for quick protections, or what protections are available for the consumers?
Well, just in terms of, say, the famous one of someone thinking, oh yes, I really like that car. They go and pay £5,000 for it, and then find it isn't that car. You can always do sort of basic sort of HPR checks, vehicle checks, to make sure that the vehicle that you're looking at, take its registration number. You can do the search, make sure that that vehicle is owned by the individual who's trying to sell it. But above all, if you're going to be particularly purchasing high-value items online, try and get them from a recommended seller. In the same way that you're usually careful when you're going and buying something in the street, you'll go to a shop that you know is good and they have a good returns policy. Think carefully in the same way before you go and buy a high-value item off Amazon, or you go in Indeed, or you see an advert for a vehicle online. Make sure that you're going to get the vehicle through.
Somebody was talking, sorry for interruption, somebody was talking that even the fraudsters can clone the cars also. And so these type of things are happening.
Indeed, and I think a final sort of stopgap there is, if you are purchasing goods online, use a credit card, because at least you're protected through the Consumer Credit Act. So, if there is something and it turns out to have been fraudulent, and you've gone and paid, £500 on your Visa, you'll be able to call your credit card company and say, oh, actually, it turned out to be a fraudulent transaction. And depending on the evidence around that you give your credit card supplier, you'll get the money back. If it's gone straight from your bank account, the money's gone. But if it's gone from a credit card, you've got that safety barrier. So certainly use a credit card when you're online.
Thank you. Viewers, I hope you are enjoying this conversation, but time constraints are always there, because we have to keep the time limits and we have to keep our watch on. So that's why we are limited to these minutes. But I hope you have enjoyed this discussion. And in coming days, if you have any questions, please email me. My email is shown on your screens. You can email me, and I'll try to answer those questions through our experts, solicitors, barristers, or our studio guests. Peter, thank you very much for joining me. And I hope you have enjoyed this discussion. And thank you very much for coming in my show.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.